Hi everyone, my name is Sue Merry. I'm an Alexander Technique teacher at Educare Small School. In this short video, I'm going to talk a little bit about the importance of Alexander-based ergonomics for your homeschooling setup. I'm inviting you to have a look at where you have your children set up to work and to see if the furniture and the general arrangement is conducive and helpful to their learning new skills and to their practicing skills that they already have in place. At Educare, we give a great deal of thought to all aspects of the school environment. The thing that probably concerns us the most is ensuring that the children are not encouraged to learn harmful habits because they're struggling to deal with badly designed or ill-fitting furniture. The way that you learn to do something is crucially important to the results that you get. Mostly in our culture, we're encouraged to do stuff, do it well, and do it quickly. Seldom does anyone really prioritize stopping for a moment and paying attention to the way in which we are doing stuff. At Educare, we teach the children that they can choose to do this. We teach them the ready list.
Stop, see, breathe, soft and tall.
We encourage the children to use the ready list in many different situations, but especially when they're working at a table, reading, writing, drawing, etc. Using the ready list is a great skill, but made much more difficult if the furniture that's being used actually works against a child being able to be soft and tall. To help you to understand this issue, please watch this short extract from a video interview with Alexander teacher Richard Brennan. Richard lives in Galway, Ireland, and runs an Alexander Technique training school. He's the author of several very popular books on the Alexander Technique. Richard has campaigned tirelessly for over 20 years to educate the educators and successive governments about the damage being done to children by the use of unsuitable school furniture. What is the actual problem with the current design of school furniture?
Okay, well, the actual problem is up until recently, most of the chairs had to go backwards by at least 5 degrees. Now, if you look at the anatomy of a skeleton, you can see that what people sit on is the sitting bone, which is a part of the pelvis, and it's completely rounded. So when you put something rounded on a slope that goes backwards, if you put a ball on a chair, it would roll backwards. And the same thing happens to the pelvis. So the pelvis is rolling backwards, and then the teacher comes in and asks the child to write at their desk. So you can't roll up a hill, or it's very difficult for you to roll up a hill. So what happens is the pelvis is rolling backwards. So the only way that the child can actually reach the school desk to write on the piece of paper is to bend their back. Okay. This is a typical child at a school desk writing. And you can see the whole bend is in the upper back. And children don't like the feeling of this posture becoming more condensed or more rounded. And they do their best to try to sit on the chair with more poise. And the first thing they do is they tilt forward on the toe front legs of the chair. So you can see how the tilt is. It's actually probably about 10 or 15 degrees of tilt. It's not just a small tilt. It's not like they get the chair flat. They tilt about 15 degrees forward. They keep the back straight, and then they can reach the desk no problem at all. They're not allowed to lean forward. The reason that's giving is you'll break the chair, but actually there's a more important reason. Somebody can trip over the back legs of the chair, probably the teacher. So they're told not to do that, and then what they do is they sit on a leg because they're trying to fill this gap. So when you sit on a leg, it raises the pelvis up and you can rock on your leg backwards and forwards. It's not good for the circulation though, so they get told not to do that. So they're just left in this kind of, they're called bucket seats. The whole pelvis is actually in this bucket, but it's actually rolling backwards and then it puts a lot of problems when they try to get to the school books. There's a wooden one, which is just a slope backwards, and the plastic ones, which is more of a bucket. They're called bucket seats. Then what happens is the bend in the back becomes a habit. The children do it even when they're not over a school desk. So this becomes a bigger problem as they get older. We're at school 15,000 hours, between the age of 5 and the age of 16. 15,000 hours. That's not including homework. So 15,000 hours of doing something over and over and over again forms a habit. And this is what we're talking about with Alexander Technique. We're talking about the formation and the eradication of harmful habits. This bending over at the top of the back is a harmful habit. This is a child of about 8 or 9, and all he's doing is he's sitting on a beach texting his friends, probably. And you can see that the head is way forward of the spine, and the head is the heaviest bit of the spine. So even on a child's head, which is much less weight than an adult's head, it's still pretty heavy in comparison to the rest of the body. And then what that does is it starts to push all the discs out of place. And those discs are pushed onto nerves, and that child there is a disaster waiting to happen. Now, at that age, you can do something about it very easily. You can teach him to be more aware. You can teach him to text in a different way. But by the time we get to adulthood, we've done it so many times, it takes quite a long time to get out of the habit. And if you compare the picture of the child texting on the beach at the age of 8 and the child sitting on the beach at the age of 1, it's a completely different shape. And then they do that so many times that by the time they're teenagers, they sit like picture number 4. And if you look at the picture very carefully, you can see that the reason she's sitting like that is a bend in the top of the spine. The head and the spine are not in alignment. And this forward tilt of the head causes a lot of tension in the neck. It causes the muscles to be overcontracted for a long period of time. And eventually, by the time they're 30 or 40, they have chronic neck problems, chronic shoulder problems, or bad back. We're talking about, in our society, 49% of the adult population suffer from backache in any given year. That's quite an epidemic.
The best chairs to use at home are genuine Trip Trap chairs made by Stocker. Educare has been using these in the hall since 1997. However, they are ideal to be used with all ages. If you already have a chair or chairs at home, then please use them for all table-based activities. Check that the chair is adjusted correctly for your child as they change and grow. It makes life easier for you too, as you can comfortably sit with your child at the table. Here are a few recommendations to help you to set up your homeschooling environment. So the child really should be able to get their feet flat on the floor or on a platform in order to support their back and allow them to sit in a soft and tall way. Also, the seat must be flat, not tilting backwards especially. And the table height must work with the chair height, so the child isn't reaching in an awkward way with the chair too low, the table too high, or the table too low, the chair too high. Using a writing slope is a really good idea if you can, because it raises the work up. And it's much better for pen-based activities. Desks always used to be sloped. And laptops and tablets can also be raised up using a slope. This is one from IKEA. And please always use a tablet at the table, never in the lap. Look what happens. Let's take a look now at a typical homeschooling setup in action. What we're looking at here is a 6-year-old boy in a very typical homeschooling setup. I wanted to see how he responded to 2 different ergonomic setups. So I didn't give him any instructions whatsoever. I just set the table up differently. And you can see on the right-hand side that he's sitting on a regular dining room chair, which is too low for him, and also he's got no support under his feet. And as a consequence, he's slumping back into the chair. And as he's reaching out to the table, there's a huge amount of tension I can see in his arm there. And it looks to me also like there's a bit of tension, which you can't quite see from this angle, but between his right shoulder and his neck. So that's a pretty poor ergonomic setup for him, which is not going to make it easy for him to carry out the activity that he's trying to do at the table. And again, he didn't have any instruction from me looking at the picture on the left-hand side. He doesn't really know about his ready list or sending his Alexander directions or anything like that. He's just naturally responding to the different setups. So on the left-hand side, I also added in a writing slope. In fact, that's actually not really a writing slope. It's a slope for a laptop computer. So it has a ridge on the bottom, but I don't actually have at the moment a writing slope. So we had to make do with that. But I think it makes the point quite well of how beneficial it is to just raise up the work slightly and angle it like the old-fashioned school desks or the desks that the clerks used to use for spending long times writing things out. Now, if you look at the difference now, you can see very clearly that his legs are coming out from the chair at a much better angle. They're not shooting straight out. He's got a slight downward slope on his thigh, coming back there for the calf, and the foot is pretty much flat on the platform. Again, no instruction was given to him there to sit like that. He just did it quite naturally. And so now his back is supported by his legs and feet, which is so important. And you can just see there that already he's sitting in a much more aligned way. And his arm is at a much better angle coming out from the back, which naturally means he has less tension in his body. So just let's take a quick look at him actually in motion. You can see much more freedom in the movement on the left-hand side, and you can see the way his head comes forward on the right, really showing that tension in the neck. So hopefully that illustrates quite well the importance of an ergonomically good setup, and that you don't even need to give Alexander instructions to get quite a bit of a difference there. An important point that I really want to make is that the way that he's sitting is all part of how he is learning and practicing the skill of writing his name on this piece of paper. So that all becomes his habit. And this is a really important thing to realize. It's not just what he's doing with his hand and the pencil, it's what he's doing with his whole body that becomes his habitual way of writing on a piece of paper. So in the right-hand picture, the whole habit he's learning there is to pull himself down in the front, slump back into the chair, not support himself with his legs, probably feeling a little insecure and slightly stressed to be in that position, and to have a lot of tension in his arm and in his shoulder and in his neck, and probably in his hand if we looked a bit closer. Whereas on the left-hand side, he's learning the same skill and practicing the same skill in a much freer and more supported way, which will be a lot less stressful for him. So he has more freedom in his arm. He feels more safe and secure supporting himself with his feet, which is a natural thing children try and do, which is why they squat on the floor or will try very hard to get their feet on the floor when they put in awkward furniture, until the habit becomes so strong and then they don't do that anymore. They get used to sitting more like the right-hand picture. And although that's not helpful and it's stressful, it's all part of the habit and becomes so familiar that it's quite hard to change it once it's really in place, which is why it's so important that we put children in good furniture that supports them and allows them to use themselves quite naturally, as they wish to do, in fact, while they're learning or practicing quite tricky or new skill. If it's not possible for you to use a trip trap chair, then an alternative would be to use a smaller table and maybe a stool if you've got one. Again, I've set him up here with just what's around the house. So he's sitting on the right-hand picture, he's sitting on a soft seat, which is really not ideal because he's sinking into that seat. And again, you're getting this kind of curvature happening in his back. And he's really, really pulling himself down at the front here. So it's not ideal. Better is the stool in the left-hand picture. Again, it's actually not perfect because you can see that he's not really able to get his feet down on the floor. He's on his toes there. And when he moves his feet, because of the height of the table and the fact that he can't quite get his legs underneath, he moves into a less ergonomically beneficial position. So I just put them in action there. And again, using the writing slope is helpful because he's not so much pulling himself down. You can see here how he's really coming down as he works, whereas he's much more upright in the left-hand picture. It's not comfortable for him. So this is an alternative. It's not ideal. And it's interesting, in the left one, I asked him actually to move his feet and put them flat on the floor, which he does, but because it alters the angle of himself at the table, his legs are just too long, he then starts to pull himself down a bit. So you're going to have to try and figure that one out if you've got this sort of arrangement.
I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you for taking the time to watch it in what's probably an insanely busy day for you. So may you keep well, keep strong, and keep your hearts open.